Before we begin, we want to acknowledge that some stories and discussions in this episode of Radiant Resilience may touch on sensitive and potentially triggering topics. These may include themes of toxic spirituality and spiritual bypassing, infertility, generational trauma, family cycles, burnout and mental health struggles, codependency and people pleasing, narcissistic or toxic relationships, and discussion of grief, death, and trauma. Our goal is to share real life experiences in a respectful and empathetic manner, offering insights into the complexities of the human spirit and the journey towards resilience. However, we understand that some content might be difficult for listeners. We encourage you to prioritize your well being and discretion when deciding to listen. Please remember this podcast is not a substitute for professional advice or support. If you find yourself needing assistance, we urge you to seek help from qualified professionals or trusted support systems. Your mental and emotional health is important to us. Thank you for your courage and for joining us in a space of understanding and compassion. Welcome back, everyone, to Radiant Resilience. I have a very special guest with me here today. I have Katie Turner. She is a registered psychologist, speaker, and the founder of Katie Turner Psychology, Inc., and the author of Fuck Toxic Spirituality, Avoiding Red Flags, and Navigating the Spiritual Path with Integrity, which I can't wait to talk about. Katie believes in a holistic approach to healing. Her mission is to bring together the science of psychology to the practice of spirituality. She offers consultation sessions, workshops, and resources for organizations and modern-day spiritual seekers. You can take the free quiz to discover your dominant intuitive superpower at www.katieturnerpsychology.com, which we will link all that stuff in the show notes. Welcome, Katie. How are you?
I'm good. Excited to be here.
Yeah, thank you for coming. So I'm going to have you start a little bit with your own personal journey, if that's okay. When you first reached out to me, you talked about being an empath and being highly sensitive. And so I think that there's probably a lot of people out there that are also struggling with that, or maybe don't even know that they're that, as well as some cycle breaker stuff. And we are going to talk all sorts of things today. So I'm going to let you go ahead and start wherever you think is appropriate.
For sure. Sounds great. I'm excited. For me, I went more psychology science route first. So I think it's important for people to know I definitely would not have called myself in spiritual or intuitive. I didn't even really know what was really believe in much of that. I thought maybe the placebo effect of if people really believe in this, if it helps them, great. And that's a very powerful healing effect, but I didn't know that there was necessarily anything beyond that
Yeah.
to
And
it. And
when you have that more scientific mind, it's really hard sometimes to change your brain to think differently.
for sure. And I wasn't raised religious or spiritual, so I didn't have a lot of exposure to it. I think our culture is very rational mind
Yeah.
dominant, and there's some things that happen that kind of cut us off from our own intuitive knowing from a
Yeah.
young age. And then it was early in the field of psychology where I was reaching burnout and disillusionment with a lot of the things I was taught early on and fresh out of grad school. A lot of just conscious mind approaches, or really, and I'm not bashing those approaches in any way. I think they're
No.
important at a certain point, but I found there was something missing when it's just, what are your thoughts? Change these thoughts. You should feel better now. That doesn't
Well,
do it for everyone, or it doesn't go deep enough all the time.
and I think it's hard when you're like stuck in the thick of things. So I've struggled with infertility, and
Mhm.
I'm sure my listeners have heard me reference this now like 45 million times. But like when I was in the deep down depths of it, the last thing I had so many people tell me, just manifest it, just manifest it. And I'm
Oh,
like,
yeah.
I sat in my
Sad. Yeah.
house visualizing sperm and egg coming together, visualizing implantation, visualizing a baby growing inside my body, being ready for it, and it still didn't happen. So
Yeah.
that's why I'm so fascinated by your toxic spirituality stuff.
Yeah, and those kind of stories, that kind of I mean, I went through my own spiritual awakening. It was a number of years before combining both together, but basically, the stuff I saw in trying to navigate that process myself, as well as I've worked with hundreds of maybe thousands of different clients by now, of there's so many spirituality can be very helpful. It can be very healing. The like soul messages, guidance, like it can be a profound source of purpose, help for people, but there's also a lot of shadow-based stuff that can happen in well-meaning spiritual communities, or even there's a whole spectrum of stuff out there. And I really wrote the book because there was stories coming up again and again of often people feeling really shamed or gaslit in their communities or by people who are close to them when they're going through hard things. Like sometimes there's a lot of spiritual bypassing and really simplified manifesting
Mm.
stuff where it's like I think the whole premise of a lot of my work is we're spiritual beings in a human nervous system. And we need to
Ooh.
also work with the human nervous system, the human experience. Like we didn't come here to just be beyond the human condition. We actually have to work with it. And we're all starting at different points or are in different points around that.
Yeah. And it also felt like when I didn't manifest it, it was my fault too.
Yeah.
That's what some of that messaging I think sends
Yeah.
too, is but if you manifest it, it happens. It just happens.
Yeah.
But if you didn't, you must not have manifested it enough.
No. And soul level stuff is not about the ego controlling the outcome. There can be places where we can quote unquote manifest or really have a lot more personal control or agency and stuff that comes in. And for all of us too, there's like hard life things that happen that we're not fully
Mhm.
in control of. And unless someone's at this, there's a part of my brain that believes it's probably possible. I don't know anyone who's here. I'm not here personally, that if you can actually like pull money out of thin air or like jewels out of thin air, if you can change your body's basic functioning, it's like most of us aren't there yet anyway. So a
Yeah.
lot of it's there's an element between if this is this helpful, and our society and culture does such a bad job of dealing with hard emotions and difficult
Mm.
things. There's psychological defenses where people will distance themselves from it. We have a hard time holding that space. Even with the spiritual piece, like part of my awakening, part of my client work is sometimes there are messages that come through of your soul chose this. It can be very healing, even with really horrible things, but that's never something you still have to hold the duality at the same time of yes, there's this, and there can be a lot of trauma to process and a lot of really hard emotions to process because there can, even when there's a spiritual truth or knowing, there's still the human emotions and experience of, and this wasn't okay and it really sucks.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, tell me, I guess first off, what is an empath or a highly sensitive person?
Yeah, so highly sensitive person is actually pretty well defined. There's a lot of research around it. So Dr. Elaine Aron, if people search the highly sensitive person, her website is one of the best sources of information for that. She has a self-test quiz there. It's about 15 to 20% of the population seems to have a nervous system wiring where it's really about processing sensory information more deeply. And so it's an evolutionary strategy of hang back, see what everyone else is doing, and then go in. So there's certain traits. It's not a diagnosis, it's not a deficit or anything, but it is a difference in nervous system. So we can be more prone to go into overwhelm or fight, flight, or freeze
Mm.
because of processing too much at
Yeah.
the same time. Yeah, maybe need more downtime, often more attuned to things. And so that one is really research established, validated. It's been around for a long time. The empathic piece is not so much out there. Empathic for me is more, it's a dominant intuitive ability, and we all have intuitive abilities, a skill or ability everyone has. Just like any other ability, we have a natural tendency to it. Like some kids are really athletic, really good at math, like others have to work harder to pick it up.
Yeah.
I think it's a skill like that, but we all have access to it in some way. And the more we actually pay attention to it, actually put time and energy into developing it, the more it can open up. And empathic is more, it's really feeling it and sensing it through your own body. So it could be picking up the emotions of others. It might be physical sensations. Oftentimes, people who are empathic, it's like you might walk into a room and it might feel really good, or it might be like, "Ooh, I feel really terrible. I want to get out of here." So
Mm. Yeah.
and picking up on the emotions of others. It's a very subtle intuitive ability. So I didn't realize I was one until I was actually already well into psychology and it was exploring more the intuition development. And it was in an intuitive development workshop where we did different exercises over the course of the workshop with paired with people we didn't know. So you have no rational information about them
Okay.
to know, am I just making this up? And it was one of those exercises where when I was describing what I was feeling in my body, the physical sensations, emotions, then it was getting feedback from people that I was paired with to be like, this is exactly. And then noticing in my body with when that shifted and working with someone else, like it would all shift inside of me. And that was a really clear moment of, oh, how long has this been going on?
Yeah.
And the medical and mental health profession, like again, it's not well studied. There isn't a lot of research about it. So I always say grain of salt. It's one of those when you Google it, you get a lot of different answers about it. Dr. Judith Orloff has some good work with it. She's a psychiatrist out of the state, and she talks more about intuitive ability, empathic ability. But again, I think there's still quite a lot of research in the field that needs to happen because there's still debate of, is this a trauma response? Is it autism? Personally, this is just more clinical experience wise and the different clients I've worked with. Those are all pathways where it can be, but I think there's elements there where it's not just complex trauma. It's not necessarily autism.
Yeah.
Like, but it can overlap with some of those things, or trauma can actually make
Sure.
it a lot more magnified as
Totally.
well. Yeah.
So you mentioned that you figured that out a little bit later on down the road.
Mhm.
When did you figure out you were highly sensitive?
Around like a little bit sooner than that, but not too much sooner.
Okay. What was it like figuring that out? Did a lot of things click into place for you?
Yeah, a lot of things made sense. Still took a lot of time to figure out, how do I actually work with this or what do I do with it? Because it's
Yeah.
like I was aware it was happening, but I didn't realize how much. I didn't realize
Mm,
how to stop it. Now I've done a lot of deeper healing work with it. I've done a lot of intuition development myself, so I do know, because I find just conscious mind Western psychology doesn't really help people who are empathic as much as it
mm,
could, because
yeah.
it's really taking it as whatever's emotions are coming up of, these are your emotions to process. Like, here's
Mm,
tools to process it, but I kind of use the metaphor of, if we're like a boat in the ocean and there's a hole in the boat, we don't want to just keep scooping out the water. We want to plug that hole because you're never going to
yeah.
stop scooping.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think we're here to process everybody's stuff. And I think it's when we can do some, when we need to learn to recognize, how do we check in of this, is this mine or not mine? It's often a combination of both if we're taking it on. And then when we do some deeper healing work, whether it's inner child work or belief system work, it's over time we can stop taking on that energy in the same way. At least, like for me, that ability shifted a lot. It's not my dominant sense anymore. And I consciously worked with that because I didn't want it to be. It's not a fun one to have.
Mm,
I'd rather just have a knowing or a message or an easier piece
yeah.
versus, I feel so terrible and, oh, someone close to me is anxious and I got to feel this at the same level they are. And they might not be motivated to work on this at all. So I guess I'm just sitting with it.
Oh man. Yeah. So do you pick up on that stuff in rooms with people? Like, how does that show up for you?
Yeah, so I went into private practice more because most of the traditional therapy systems, you're mandated what types of techniques you can use
Okay.
and what types of approaches you can do. So you can't as openly be like, this is what I do. Who wants to work with me?
Mhm.
Who's looking for this already? And so I find I get a lot of clients who already are connected quite spiritually, and or they're wanting to develop that, or they're looking for something deeper,
Okay.
or they may not be necessarily going too far down the woo rabbit path, but they're, with the professional title, they're more open to exploring that. So I'm always bringing in clinical experience and like intuitive ability. So I'm not just listening, I'm like full on intuitive, kind of picking
Feeling
up
it.
like what my feeling, seeing, sensing, getting messages. And so it can help guide the work. And always clients are in control of where it goes. But sometimes it can be very obvious in the room of this, there's the client's energy and there's other energies going on. So
Oh.
this may not be all yours. There may be something you're carrying. But I guide people through processes to help them check in. Because it is really more about going within. And oftentimes when we get stuck in problems or issues, I know I used to have a lot of anxiety, depression, like stress a lot of the time. And I think that's pretty common in our culture because we come to these crossroad or decisions and we're super stressed out. We don't want to make the wrong choice. We're asking everyone for advice. What should I do? Should I leave this job? Should I stay in this relationship? And we can go in these circles. Whereas that intuitive, when we can really arrive at intuitive knowing, It's almost like our own personalized GPS system where it's this deeper knowing, this more settled in of it doesn't tell us the whole, here's all the steps that are going to happen, but it can be like, this is the next right thing right now.
Okay.
And that can bring down anxiety. Like when we develop trust with that over time, it can definitely just make life a lot easier
Yeah.
to navigate and a lot more, not lot less anxiety, a lot more knowing, like your own knowing.
Yeah. What do you recommend for people who take on other people's crap?
Yeah. I think the first part is checking it out to see, is this you potentially? Yeah, and that one part would be almost more meditation, times, things that can help us. We really have to take care of our own like energy hygiene,
Yeah.
whether it's like time in nature, long baths, like things that help us almost like release and have that visualization, meditation of releasing energy and also maybe putting up protection. But I think that's really important in the beginning, but we always have to keep doing that if we're not working with the parts of us that aren't, that are still taking on that energy,
Yeah.
whether that's like early childhood. And I find people, even for myself, even people who grew up without super traumatic backgrounds or like just good enough parents, like nothing super abnormal, really sensitive kids are almost like these little energetic sponges that just, they're picking up so much all the time and they're so
Mhm.
sensitive to energy. They're just born so aware, and there are these normal natural childhood development processes cognitively, so we can end up with these, there's some common like stuck belief systems that can come up. Like I've had to do my work with them myself, and I find there's similar patterns for a lot of my clients where
Mhm.
it's like we can feel emotionally like really responsible for people's stuff or be
Mhm.
more prone to people pleasing, be
That's
more
what I
prone
was,
to codependent patterns. Like, because if we say no or like upset someone, we're so upset, like emotionally upset by it. And our rational mind can do all the work and be like, I don't want to care. It's not my problem. I said this kindly. It's okay for me to do this. Yet the emotion and the guilt and the overwhelm can still be so high. That often needs to be worked with in a different way to start feeling more
that,
separate from other people's stuff.
that is resonating with me so much. Like, I am working on my people pleasing skills, but I was going to ask you that if empaths tend to be people who are more people pleasers because they're picking up on the negative energy and therefore wanting to fix it.
I think we're more prone to it and it runs
Mhm.
deeper.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also it also too, we can be more like, even when we do all our work and have our rational mind goals and tell ourselves all the things around boundaries and that this is okay, it's healthy, we can often struggle a lot more with feeling okay with taking that space. Whereas
Mm.
many people who aren't empathic at all, and again, there's going to be differences with this for everyone. Sometimes it's more, it's like the sponge in the Teflon pan. For some people, it's
Yeah.
water off a duck's back where they're like, okay, whatever, move on. You're like, oh, that must be nice in some ways. But yeah.
Oh man, I know. I've got a lot of like family drama and stuff too. And my husband's always, you need to stop taking that on yourself. And I'm
But
like,
you can't just, if it's actually energetic, you can't just stop. Like it is a
right.
process. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So you're validating me.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, it's so hard. And I find myself being able to put myself in other people's shoes a lot easier than
Mhm.
specifically, I guess, in my immediate life. My husband, he doesn't, none
Mhm.
of that stuff ever bothers him. Other people's
Yeah.
energy, he's like the Teflon pan.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I find myself, I'm a little bit more able to understand other people's perspectives, which I think is
Mhm.
probably a good thing to some degree. But
For sure. I think there's benefits of it. Just like any nervous system, there's kind of trade-offs of there's costs and benefits.
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, but what I've learned is to not do that at the expense of myself, which
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
really hard.
For sure. That's been a big part of my learning too. And it seems to, it's often something that comes up at different layers and shows up again and again, like that spiral staircase of development. Like it
Yeah.
can shift at different points in our life.
Yeah. Crazy. So why don't you talk to me about being a cycle breaker?
Yeah, so I think cycle breakers are really more, just to define the term, it's the people, and it's a lot of, I think, our generation and generations that are happening now. There's so much more normalization around mental health. I also think psychology is a relatively young science compared to some of the other ones, and it's come a long way. There's still evolution, there's still work to do with it. But I think if we look at our parents' generation, grandparents' generation, there was a lot of kind of just survival. I don't think there was a high level of emotional attunement, a lot of this like attachment parenting and healthy boundaries and healthy communication, self-regulation, emotional awareness.
Oh yeah, all
Some
of
families
that.
might have it, but it's in my experience, it's more rare to have people who have that foundation than people who are like, yeah, like they did the best they could, and I can see why they are because of the way they were parented.
Yeah. The generational trauma or whatever is very real and not necessarily, I think you say trauma, it sounds like really bad, but it can be, I think even like people pleasing. My
Yeah.
and my grandma are definitely people
And
pleasing
gender
too.
roles, like the gender roles of it to be like women used to be
Yeah.
property and their job was this. And so you had to raise women and girls to be good wives and take care of these things. And we've had change, we've had stuff happen, but a lot of us have had these things modeled of what do men do with emotions? What are women supposed to do?
Yeah.
What were we told? What do we want for, and what did we see growing up? Yeah.
Yeah, it's super interesting because it can go back pretty far when you start thinking of that kind of stuff, especially the gender roles. It's crazy.
Yeah, and it's not about because the thing that comes up for so many people and is really normal is when we talk about cycle breaking, it's not about bashing our parents or being like it's all their fault or they're bad people. It's really no, like they did for the most, in most cases, they did the best they could with where they're at.
Yes.
That may not fit for everyone, but again, it is that contextual piece. And it's really more about, I think there's, with more awareness, there's that piece of many people are making that conscious decision to say, what do I want to do differently? Like, how do I want to do things differently? How do I want to either break these cycles within myself? Like, even that work on people pleasing to say, I don't want to keep doing this. I don't want to keep
Yeah.
unconsciously repeating this and passing it on. If we have our own children, it's also, I don't want to pass this on to the next generation. I want to do things differently. I want to learn. And it's, I think it's really great and really positive. There is a shadow side to it as well, though, too, because I think it's primarily, I see the majority I see of people holding this is often women. And
Okay.
it's a really, I don't see as many men. And I'm not saying no men do. I just think in statistically, like we know more women go to therapy, like we know more
Mm.
women are open to emotions and like doing this kind of work. But
Yeah.
I also see a lot more moms and women in my practice who really struggle with this mom guilt around like any little thing. If they're off at one point of, am I going to screw up my child? Am I passing down this trauma? Whereas like I don't see culturally or collectively too many dads coming in
Okay.
with this like impossible expectation dad guilt. So if I have to be the change, work full time, do all these Pinterest things, like
That's a little bit of that gender role thing coming in too,
yeah,
because the man, it was always okay for the men to just go to work and do all the thing and do whatever he wanted, whenever he wanted.
yeah,
But the women were supposed to be at home,
yeah.
homemakers, taking care of the kids. And if you weren't doing those things the right way, then you were
Mhm.
considered selfish or whatever. But I do believe all of our parents, I agree with you, like everybody did the best that they could. But I
For the
guess,
most part, and there's some extreme examples where for
sure.
some people that may be that might not be helpful. That might be like, no, they could have done better. And so it's
But I
really,
could definitely see the toxic side of that
yeah.
nowadays, being aware of that, because I think the whole cycle breaker term is
Hmm.
new also. And our parents can be like, oh, we did the best we could with the
Yeah.
knowledge we had.
Yeah.
Now I could see it being like, oh my gosh, I don't want to fuck my kid up. And what, and then like second guessing everything you do. And then maybe you're a worse parent because you're going that direction instead.
Yeah, because I think there's a piece of doing the best we can, but self-compassion in the
Yeah.
process too. And yeah.
Yeah, it's so scary though. I do not have children, but
Mhm.
I just can't imagine. Am I making the right decision doing this? Am I not making? I bet that's every decision
And the
every
cycle
parent
breaker
makes.
doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be the next generation. Sometimes it's just more of this stops with me and I'm not
Yeah.
repeating it too.
Yeah.
And I'm not the same in when I go back home for the holidays or I'm around family and it's and then I'm the one like getting the tension of that tension to be like, I'm not doing it the same way anymore.
Yeah, that's hard though, because I found myself like early on when I would talk about possibly parenting in my future or whatever, being like, my kid will not do this and these will be the rules. And I grew up in a very strict household and I was the
Mhm.
oldest of three. And so it was a very strict environment. My
Yeah.
husband is the opposite. He grew up in a very free flowing, do whatever you want.
Yeah.
He's an only child. He got away with murder.
Yeah.
And like we've talked about like how we would parent and
Yeah.
like very different. So I think it's hard to also, my point in that is that it's hard to not become your parents also to some degree.
When it can, sometimes you can unconsciously recreate what they're doing. Some people may go too far the other way too. Like if it's like there was too much discipline, not enough love, it's really easy to overcorrect and be like, okay, I'm only doing love and I'm only doing support and I'm only validating their feelings, and not knowing how do you bring in actually like the loving limits and the holding them accountable, because our own childhood stuff can be so tied into it and it can really trigger like big emotions.
Yeah, for sure. So do you consider yourself a cycle breaker then?
I do, yeah.
Okay. Would you talk about that?
I think it's just like I've worked on a lot of the things that are very common, I think, that I see for a lot of women holding, and the sensitive piece of the over, I definitely would be prone to putting everyone else's needs first at my own expense, like getting into burnout, being into like not so healthy relationships or friendships. I think part of it is even just being that like oldest daughter, really sensitive, very aware. It wasn't intentionally put on me, but it was just more, I don't think many of our parents didn't even understand the high sensitivity, the empathic piece. Like a lot of highly sensitive kids who are internalizers, like they seem okay because they're really often very anxious. They're often picking up a lot, but they don't want to add like burden anyone. So they're often like the good kid or the like helper, or oh, they're so mature for their age because they see all the stress and they're trying to help take care and help everybody else feel okay so they can feel okay. Like I was one of those too, where probably most of the adults were like, oh, but she's doing good in school and she's fine and all these things. And it was like, yeah, but inside I'm a like anxious disaster, but no one's going to see that.
Yeah. Yeah, my parents got divorced when I was 19. And so my siblings were, oh gosh, math, 15 and 7. And then it really wrecked my mom. And so I ended up being the rock of the family because I was 19 and I remember having to I don't even know what my emotions were.
Yeah.
When I look back on that
And you're like,
time period.
developmentally, it's not appropriate. Like you get why it happened, but you're like, a 19-year-old shouldn't be the one who's holding all of this.
Yeah, it was pretty rough. And then I did that all through my 20s and into part of my 30s. And I'm like, okay. And that's why my husband's, okay, Tawny, you need to stop. But I'm like, this is literally what I've done my entire life. So take care of my family. So it's really hard to shut that off.
It is, because I think I often talk to people about our mind is really, it's like an iceberg where we have our conscious mind, but our conscious mind is only running about 5 to 10% of the show on a good day. And all our subconscious, unconscious stuff, like if we go into the fight or flight piece, like again, trauma can be like PTSD level. It's also, we all have some level of like intense or distressing emotional memory that's from the past that blurs into the present. And it doesn't mean it's not like big T trauma in terms of this is post-traumatic stress disorder. It's more of those times, like all of us have this, where we'll have an interaction and we're like, why am I so bothered by this? I don't want to be. Like with the holidays coming up, it's almost these things of I'm spiraling for 5 days talking to my mom or dad or like my sister or whatever, and be like, and the logical mind's like, I don't want to care. But emotionally it just keeps going. It's like there's probably something from the past like blurring into that too. And I think we can get into these, if we only focus on conscious mind approaches, we can get into this like war with ourselves of stop feeling this. What's wrong with me? I don't. And then we gaslight ourselves. Whereas that nervous system part is really important. And I found that was missing in a lot of my early training around like this stuff is actually, it's adaptive to be stored in this in a different way. If you're a minor, if you're dependent on your family, if you're also like, I'm like, everybody's not okay and I do need to step it up. It's like over functioning in that case is probably the most adaptive thing someone could do. It's like, this was helpful. It served its purpose at a time. The hard part is once it gets wired in our subconscious or unconscious, we just keep repeating it without realizing we're doing it. And we'll recreate it, and our adult self can realize it, we can recognize the pattern, we can go like, I want to stop this. And it takes a lot of conscious effort to always be on it, and it slides back in these other ways and like creeps in, and we're like, I'm doing it again. Or it's so much effort because emotionally our emotions aren't fully on board with it. So we often do need like deeper tools to shift that emotional energy and like connect with that younger part of us, be like, thank you for doing this. This was necessary. Let's catch up that subconscious to like where we are present day to be like, everybody's grown up. We don't need to do this anymore. We can still be loving and helpful and leave them to the consequences of their own choices now.
Yeah, it's so hard. Which I can imagine parents probably feel the same way too, right? Like you don't
Yeah.
want your kid to have to suffer those consequences, but a lot of the times they do.
But sometimes, again, the rational mind part of almost when we can pull ourselves out of it and be like, if this was a friend and a friend's family was doing
Mm,
like this, we'd see it so clearly. Like it's
mhm.
so obvious, but it's when it's our own emotions, that's where we get sucked into it. I don't know what to do. And it's not, this is someone else that's pretty clear.
Why is
Not
that? Why do
always.
we get stuck in that?
That's the emotional part. And it's also our family of origin is usually where a lot of our triggers and our subconscious stuff plays out. So that is a strategy I'd often recommend for people to say, because sometimes we don't really know, but sometimes it's okay if this person is an addiction, they keep coming to you for money, they're not treating the addiction. You're like, it doesn't make sense to actually, you might as well light that money on fire. You might
Yeah.
want to wait, like you might want to redirect them to other resources, love them, but set firm boundaries of the boundaries are actually more loving here,
Yeah.
trying to get them to support, express concern, organize an intervention. But if you're some stuff is actually enabling, not helping.
Yeah. So I guess this kind of rolls us into toxic relationships. Friendships and romantic relationships, I think,
Mhm.
are similar. But how do you, especially with family, it's hard to put those hard boundaries. If you've done everything and there's nothing fixing it, but you need to remove yourself from that
Mhm.
relationship, that's very hard with family. It's a little easier
Yeah.
with friends,
Mhm.
probably more difficult with romantic relationships as well. But what are your thoughts on all of that?
Yeah, I think it really depends. Oftentimes, when people are on that cycle breaking healing journey, they're on a path of like conscious personal development. Like they've really been, there's usually a value piece of, I want to keep being the best version of me, and this is
Mhm.
ongoing work.
Yeah.
And I think with that, that it can be a lonely path because it puts us into almost a minority of the population.
Yeah.
And so not everyone's doing that work, not everyone's interested in doing that work, but the more we do that work, the more we want people around us who also are doing that work and are
Hmm.
working to develop basically their emotional maturity and capacity. We want people who, because again, I think most quote unquote toxic stuff is usually well meaning people, like good people at
Sure.
heart, doing the best they can with where they're at, but they've got stuff playing out that they don't have a handle on or don't recognize or
Mhm.
realize is going on. And there's a spectrum of that. And sometimes on that spectrum, you have actually really harmful or dangerous people, like that is out there, but I don't, that's not the majority. And, but I think as we are doing our own healing work, the chosen family, the friends, like the people we want to choose around us are, if we're taking responsibility for that in ourselves and really working on that, we need that in people who are really close to us as well. Can they reflect on their own emotions? Can they reflect on things that happened and take personal accountability? To
Yeah.
say, oh, you know what? Like, I was actually having a bad day. I was triggered. I took it out on you. It wasn't about you at all. Someone who doesn't have that ability is going to project stuff onto everybody else, and they're never doing anything
Mm,
wrong. Don't you dare talk to them about it. Like, that is not going to
yeah.
go well. So it's, can you actually have constructive, difficult conversations, or does it just go nowhere? And I do find that family is one of those ones that is often harder. There are some people who get to a point where it's, this is so harmful and so toxic that I actually need to go no contact with them
Mm,
because it is the healthiest thing. I find that is more rare and it's more extreme
okay.
circumstances. But when I do want to validate that when it's extreme, it's real. Because sometimes people get a lot of pushback from others of like, but it's your mom or it's your dad, it's family. It's nah, this was a stranger. You probably already have a restraining order against them. Like
Yeah.
relationships are a two-way street. If this is another adult, like you have to keep yourself safe first.
Yeah.
I have a kind of exercise I have clients go through around almost like a boundary bullseye exercise of thinking about a dartboard,
Ah, yeah.
like where does this person fall and really assessing if you had a friend or someone you were taking care of, someone who just moved here and your whole network's going to help them out, really taking a step back and almost doing an inventory of, okay, go to this person if your car breaks down and it needs help. They're very good with mechanical things. This person's good with computers. And who is good with emotions? Because
Mm.
when we're in it and it's our family, we often go to people who actually are not good at this. Like they
Oh.
cannot do it. You'd never recommend someone go try to like have a heartfelt conversation or get emotional support from them. But when we're unconsciously in a pattern, we just keep being like, oh, like I called my mom and this was horrible.
Mm.
And now I'm I'm even more hurt.
Yeah.
So it's like our adult self, those needs and those relationship needs are valid, but we got to be conscious about who we're going to for them and be consciously developing networks who can hold that space. And I think emotional maturity wise, you have to have a certain level of emotional maturity to be really safe in the inner circle. So
Yeah.
sometimes we have to keep people more, sometimes we have to manage the relationship or keep it more of, is this someone I see? Sometimes some family it's okay, I'm good as long as I've got my spouse there with me. We go to a neutral place, like there's other people there, but if we go stay with them for an extended period, like this is not a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so hard. And what about friends?
Yeah, and again, I think it depends. It's like sometimes there's a piece of as you do the work, it's easier with people you don't know very well or aren't emotionally invested in. It can be easier to start setting those boundaries. Existing ones can be harder. And
Yeah.
sometimes we may need to work on developing more of a network because if we're not sure, there is a danger or risk of as we start changing how we show up, sometimes some people level up with us and
Yeah.
the relationships get better, but some blow up and fall away.
Yeah. Yeah.
And again, romantic relationships too. Sometimes it's easier if people are doing the work in early dating. Like it can be really quick of like first red flags. No, I'm out. Thank you. It was
Yeah.
nice meeting you. Not like screen this a lot more. If you're in a long-term relationship with someone though, that it's often very normal that you want to do everything you can to see, can we work together? Is this person willing to change? Is there anything I can do to make this work? And it's a longer process often.
Yeah, for sure. Especially if you've been in it long term, you have kids, you've been married a
Mhm.
long time, unless there was
Yeah.
something blatantly on it, like cheating or something like
Mhm.
that. But
Even cheating is one of those ones that, like, if it's a chronic infidelity issue with the one person, they're not going to get help for that. That's not likely going to change. Cheating is one of those ones that people don't talk about publicly, but it actually happens a lot more than people realize. And depending on the circumstance, it may not have to be a deal breaker. Because, again, a lot of people would come in of like, if this person cheated once, the advice they're going to get from everyone is walk away. Whereas
yeah,
no, if this was an addiction issue and there's not too much trust broken, if they're having like mental health stuff and they're actually going to deal with it, if the relationship like drifted apart and it's not blaming the person, but there are times where therapy can actually help and people can rebuild an even stronger relationship. There's other
yeah.
times where it's going to be better to leave.
I think most people should probably just give it a try to fix it. And then at some point,
It's time to go to sort out because sometimes you're like it's again that piece of what are the characteristics the other person's bringing to the table.
yeah,
Are they willing to take responsibility? Are they willing to work on their stuff? We're all gonna have stuff at different times in life. The big difference of who's safe is can they self-reflect? Can they work on it? Can they take accountability? And if someone doesn't do that, it does not bode well for how this
yeah.
is going to keep playing out and how you're going to keep getting treated.
Yeah, a marriage or a relationship is a team effort, right? It can't just be one person putting all the work into bettering themselves in the relationship. The
Mhm.
other person isn't willing to at least try to meet them part way.
Yeah, yeah. It's not going to be a like happy, satisfying relationship for both parties.
Yeah. And everybody deserves to be happy too.
Yeah.
I understand that's tough in
For
certain
sure.
ways.
Yeah.
What brought you to doing all of this work?
Yeah, I was always part of the empathic, I think, sensitive piece is from such a young age and that like little helper, oldest, over responsible person, I think too. I usually people would tell me a lot of stuff really quickly and I didn't really know necessarily what to do with it. I wanted to help people. I think part of it, there was desire and an interest and kind of soul purpose in it, but it was also intertwined with kind of my own childhood patterns that weren't all healthy. And so I've worked a lot with that over the years. It'll still pop up a little bit here and there, but it's not at the same level it
Yeah.
used to be of like, okay, I need to help everybody else and I'm fine. Don't worry about me. I'm not
Yeah.
even paying attention to myself. And so I think a lot of it was interest brought me into it. I think the intuitive piece, I'm like, this feels more like I didn't see this coming. I never would have expected it. In hindsight, I'm like, it does feel more like soul path and purpose and part of my kind of
Mm.
mission on the planet.
Yeah, I love that. I guess if you are an empath, you probably make a pretty good psychologist.
Depending where you are in managing it. And yeah.
That's
Yeah.
true. That's
Yeah.
true. But I just mean being able to have a little bit of more empathy and compassion for what people are going through. I just had a conversation in one of my other interviews recently about the medical fields in general not having enough empathy in those fields. So, like,
Yeah.
for example, my fertility clinic is full of all of these women who
Mhm.
have been able to have kids and don't really get
Yeah.
it. And yet they're
Yeah.
that's the environment they're working in. So the compassion for the patient
Yeah.
is not where I think it should be. But
Yeah.
I also understand that to some degree, if you haven't been through it, it's really hard to have.
Well, it's a complicated one too. So when we get into medical, because even I've seen a huge shift, and I work with a number of healthcare providers as well, where some people just don't have it. Like some specialists
Yeah.
or others, like you see their reviews, and people are not happy with the
I feel
treatment.
like
Some
all
people get
medical
sent.
professionals have bad
I
reviews.
no, I also yeah, like some have a few, but some have a lot. And so there's some people where this seems like part of their personality. They may not have had to develop this as much, but I do have a lot of like compassion and appreciation for healthcare professionals too, because I think some of
Sure.
the like there's a question in our province of is this getting pushed to privatized care? And there's been a ton of cuts. There's been and with the pandemic and like having to work through the pandemic, there's so much burnout in the medical profession
Yeah,
too.
that's
That
true.
there's so many people that likely would have been empathetic if the systems actually were supporting them
Yeah.
to do their job and pay them appropriately, and
Yeah.
that they could actually recharge, because burnout, it's like that empathy goes away, and the like it's burnout can get very dangerous where yeah, so I think both sides of it, and I've seen and I've heard more and more of like bad experiences from people in medical situations over the last since the pandemic basically,
Yeah.
and some of these
Yeah.
system issues where I'm like a lot of this is actually like healthcare burnout.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand that too. I think
Yeah,
that's very
yeah,
fair. We've got a friend who's a doctor, like an ER doctor, and
yeah,
he works he's like our age in our mid to late 30s, and he's
yeah,
working nights. And you're
yeah,
like, how are you doing that at this
yeah,
age?
yeah,
Like, how are you working overnights? And then I've got another friend who's a nurse who works nights. And I don't like, yeah, you can't live a normal life doing that. You have to sleep all day
yeah.
when everyone else is doing all their things. But then if you have things you have to do, you have to get up and then you're losing sleep. And how can you possibly be a good doctor when you're losing sleep and you're
Yeah, and if they're getting
overworked?
pressured,
And
there's not enough people to cover and other things
yeah.
too. But I do think empathy as a skill set in general, it's not something we're really taught. It's modeled. It's something some people are more naturally prone to, but again, it's a skill set that gets developed. And I think in general, there is more and more tension. There's more and more stress. Like people aren't doing well, and we're losing like empathy skills and self-regulation skills as a society as a whole. There's
Yeah.
more tension, more polarization, more division, and
Mm,
not as much connection. And I think empathy is something that should be taught like in schools, and more people
yeah.
should have
How
training.
would
And
you
again,
teach that?
it's teachable. Like therapists spend years, and like we have whole classes where we're videotaped and practice and
Really?
watch yourself, because again, like active listening, being able to reflect back, being able to not jump in and fix things for people, being able to just hold space, being
Mm.
able to put yourself in someone else's shoes, it's a skill set that can be taught.
Well, yeah,
Yeah,
that's true. There's a lot of therapists out there. So
yeah, yeah.
if that's part of your basic training there, then that's good.
Yeah, and even people who are naturally developed, I know when I would watch those tapes, I'd just be like, "Oh my God, you raised this wrong. You went too far with it. You
Oh
gotta."
no.
Yeah. So
I'm glad it's something that can be taught because then that means it's
yeah,
something that we can all work on, right?
yeah, yeah, for
Once we're
sure.
aware of it.
If people are aware and want to work on it, they can, and not everyone will be, and that's okay too.
Yeah. I'm curious. I feel like I've had a lot of conversations lately about burnout.
Mm-mm.
And I don't know if it's the age I'm at because I feel we all start out.
Age, and it's higher. It's the frequency is higher. I've never seen the rates of burnout in my practice and like mental health that I've seen basically
Mhm.
since like about a year into the pandemic, and it hasn't stopped since. And it is the research around natural disaster recovery is it takes about, and these are based on like fires, floods, a single event, it happens, it's done, you recover.
Yeah.
The pandemic was like years of this natural disaster going
Yeah.
on. And like mental health wise, we don't see the full impact until about 18 months to 2 to 3 years after. So it's starting to go down now, but so many workplaces, people were like at their max. Like some people did okay in it, but a lot of people were really struggling and
Yeah.
stretched really thin, didn't have a support network, or trying to figure out work, schooling from home, caregiving, like isolated, shut off. So a lot of people weren't doing great. And then things opened up and it's like, hey, back to the office. And a lot of companies were like, let's make up for lost time now.
Mm,
With zero awareness of you have a fried staff.
yeah.
So again, there is higher and higher rates. There's some discussion of some of the places in Europe are going through like mass employment exodus or like quiet quitting,
Mm,
where people are less wanting to work these crazy hours
yeah.
for a job or company. And
And I just think I talk to so many people that work in corporate jobs too that are
Mhm.
just overworked and they're not hiring the people to help with that.
Yeah.
And I don't understand. I'm not running a corporate company, but I did own a small restaurant for a minute. And I feel like the whole employee-employer relationships, especially in the corporate world, are so bad.
Yeah, I see a lot of that too. And there's a lot of these like bigger companies too that are making like record shareholder profits, but they're slashing expenses to make those, and that often means slashing workforce, but still expecting people to because oil and gas is big here, and like I've seen I'm not an expert in it at all, so I'm in no way saying this, but it's more the behind the scenes stuff I hear or see about, where it's tough because the people who are left there are scared for their job security. So a lot of times they'll just go in and be like, hey, I'm going to just work really hard and don't want to be the next one to go.
Yeah.
But burnout rates, it's not sustainable. Like then people get sick, they have leave, they'll go somewhere else. So it's just, I think in general, the burnout rates have been so much higher in so many different areas where it's always been a risk, but it was estimated following the pandemic that about 50% of the population within that 1 year to 3 year mark would actually meet criteria for mental health disorder.
Oh yeah, I
It was
believe
also
that.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was a tough time. But yeah, I don't know. I just think that I feel like the employer-employee relationship doesn't seem like rocket science to me. And I feel like it could be so much better. There are companies that are doing it right, but I feel like most of the people that I know that are in corporate America hate their lives, hate their job. They're miserable, they're overworked, and a lot of people leave around that 30s and 40s age. And so that's why I think some of it is my age. It's like in your 20s, you can sustain that a lot better.
Yeah. Again, and it shifts as it goes. And I think there's oftentimes there can be company stuff too. With the burnout piece, we often have personality factors that can contribute to it too. Sure. I've gone through my own rounds. I've gone through my own rounds of burnout or more severe burnout. Like part of my spiritual awakening was burning out in the psychology system and grad school like registration, and I got a one-way ticket to India and ended up being in India for about 9 months. I burnt myself out at a volunteer meditation retreat where it was for me to recharge. I ended up taking on so many responsibilities. I had to like I applied for a separate room because I didn't have time to eat. And then then I really realized too, I was like, it's not just the environment, like this is me. Like I'm actually at a place that people go to chill out, and I've just burnt myself out again volunteering on my recharge time. So sometimes there is these personality factors of like high overachiever, like not good at direct communication. We're prone to overfunctioning and we fix everything else, and like we want to keep everyone else happy. We can burn ourselves out in any environment unless we're like scooping ice cream and you got to go home at the set time and there's nothing to take with you. I think the challenge is that there's some company places are pretty toxic. You have toxic managers and it's not good to stay there. But there's many other jobs too where the conveyor belt of work that comes at people is always more than can get done in a day. And so personal boundaries and that personal work is really important to say. If you actually do talk to your supervisor, if you do communicate, if you're clear on this is how much I can do, this is what's already on my plate, what do you want prioritized, and then you only do that. I think sometimes there is more personal agency or autonomy even in corporate too.
It's always, my sister's an accountant, a corporate accountant, and talk about a workaholic world. And one time she was complaining about how she gets emails at 10 p.m. and 5 in the morning and blah, blah. And I'm like, why don't you just tell them you
them? Don't check your email then. Like you don't need that. That's a boundary piece, is you don't need people. If we rely on everybody else to respect our boundaries, we're going to burn out. But if we put the things for ourselves in that, and the email ones is such a good example because it's turn off your notifications. Don't let it go to your cell phone. If you need to put it in your email signature or somewhere there, turn on an auto reply about when they can expect a response. You can set all that up and then do not look at it until you're in the office the next day.
But I wonder if there's a fear of being fired if you do that. If you put that boundary there because I said to her, I'm like, why don't you just tell them you are only checking emails from this time to this time and only check them in that time. So if they don't get a hold of you, they don't get any help. And I think there was a fear of being fired there, of not doing my job. So
and I would check, I'd almost be like, is that an expectation? Because sometimes it could be checking with someone higher up to say, am I clear to do this? And if you have a clear, then do it. You should. Like, and healthy managers who understand burnout and want sustainable staff, like will sometimes they often have that in place.
Yeah.
Some may not. Sometimes they'll be like, do as I say, not as I do, or they'll be like, no, I want you to have balance, but they're working all the time. If
Yeah.
other people aren't getting fired, or if you have that documented, then it's
Yeah.
okay. Yeah.
And I think salary jobs are a little bit more difficult in that regard too, because I think they just think, oh, you're salaried, so you're just going to work. Where if you were paid hourly, they're like, we want you to stop at a certain time because we don't want to pay you more.
Yeah.
So where
When, and
salary is
again,
what it is.
yeah, and sometimes like people's employers do expect that, but sometimes people check it and it's actually their own internalized expectations, and they can not stop doing that. And they're
Oh,
would be
interesting.
supported to stop doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like looking at it from that perspective of like, it's definitely a personality thing because there are workaholics out there too.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
how would you recommend somebody working on trying to shut that down if they are that person and they don't want to be that person anymore?
On the workaholic side of
Yeah.
things. Yeah, I mean, I think there's different strategies for different people of where it can be. I would recommend sometimes there's that kind of reality checker looking for evidence first too, to say, okay, is your job actually going to be at risk? Because if it actually is, then
Yeah.
we need to make a plan here of what zone of safety do you have to work within. Are we
Yeah.
building other skill sets and an escape plan?
Yeah.
Or being aware of, okay, when this gets so bad, you actually may need to go on disability.
Mm.
Because burnout really bad can actually end up as like a diagnosed mental health. Like it may end up as depression, anxiety. People can get very sick physically or psychologically. So sometimes this is forced on you now if you don't. And yeah, so I'd look at the kind of reality check first, and then it may be like what kind of slow. You don't have to do everything all at once. I'm a big believer in like small steps over time and that sustainability, getting it to be more of a comfort level. There's usually a lot of fear and guilt stuff that comes up. So if we go within that comfort zone, like bear that and feel it anyway and just stick to it. And even giving yourself like a quarter or a few months to say, let's just try this and then check in with my supervisor, see if I'm
Yeah.
okay. Am I getting in trouble? Let it all settle in, because that feedback loop and that trust process is important too. When it's like, oh, the world didn't fall apart. I'm actually more rested. I
Yeah.
actually am seeing the benefits of this. Then it's easier to maintain it.
Yeah. That was a topic I didn't think we would touch on, but that was fun. So how long have you been doing your own private practice then?
It's been over 10 years.
Oh,
I've been
wow.
about two
Okay.
decades in the mental health field. Yeah.
Yeah. And you're loving it?
I do. Yeah. It's nice. It's such a big area that there's so many different directions you can go with it, and it can change and evolve. And it's really such an honor to like work with the clients I get to work with. And
Yeah. When did you publish your book?
just in the summer.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's recent.
Yeah. Yeah. It's recent. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think I'm gonna have to go check that out because I love that. Because we're also living in a world right now that's going that direction of the manifesting and all the spirituality stuff a little maybe too far the one direction.
And I think it's, again, like we're talking about this like capitalistic piece in the corporate world, and it's like that. If you look at it, zoom out a little bit with a lot of this manifesting stuff, or people who've taken it, there's a lot of influence of that in it too. There's a lot of kind of ego piece. Most of us have been to some kind of workshop or development thing where it's imagine the car and the check and it's so materialistic. And I'm not saying like materialistic stuff isn't part of it, but it misses the point of like soul purpose. When we're in our achievement oriented brain of I need the next job, I need the title, I need the raise, I need this, it's like our brains on brain, like achievement oriented brain scans, are less healthy. They're less resilient. They're more prone to depression. They're more prone to anxiety. Brains that are more connected to some sense of spirituality, meaning, purpose, like there's an importance of money to a certain degree of safety, security. Can we provide for our basic needs? Can we relax into that? There's a huge difference there. After that, it gets really complicated. And there's also places where more money does not make more happiness at all. And money cannot buy you happiness. It cannot buy you good relationships. It cannot buy you purpose or meaning.
Neither can things.
Yeah, things, material stuff. And
Cars,
so,
houses, fancy,
yeah,
expensive things.
yeah, it can give you a dopamine hit and like a short-lived sense of a boost, but it
Yeah.
doesn't last.
Yeah.
And so that's where I think there's some things where that has infused in spiritual teachings communities, or just been like these kind of ancient traditions that have been co-opted by people, and like often a lot of white people have taken over some of it and then really watered it down.
Yeah.
And I think there's this piece of no, it's also about soul purpose, meaning. It can be about slowing down. It can be about like who is it we want to be in the future, and what are those higher order values.
Yeah.
Yeah, and again, that nervous system part, because when you tell someone to just manifest, it like I'm like, oh, it grinds my gears, because there's that piece of someone with a really highly traumatized nervous system. Other pieces, it's someone who's going through things. People can often get very gaslit, and spiritual communities can often sometimes be really judgy if people take medication or something. It's like you're not doing all the things, and it's we're in a human body. Sometimes this is part of the leg of the stool that needs support,
Yeah.
and it can help someone like live a more whole, authentic life. And everybody's path is unique.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Based on what you're going through. And
Yeah.
no one person's going through the exact same thing. So,
No. Yeah.
uh, let's see. Oh, tell me about planifesting.
Yeah, so the manifesting piece is I don't love manifesting, like the manifesting term on its own, because again, I think it gets so much into just visualize it, just think it. There's a risk with that of just a lot of like meditation, thinking work without what are you actually doing?
Okay.
What are the steps? What are the real world things? Because it's a combination of both. I also think around the experiences I've had personally with like stuff that's shown up or manifested, it's not something my ego necessarily wanted. Like even the practice I have, like the direction I went in my career, like I never would have saw that coming. If someone would have told me that, I would have laughed in their face. When it was happening, I was struggling with it so badly, because I was like, do I leave behind this path? I've invested all this stuff in psychology. I didn't see a path forward. I was like, am I walking away from all these years of
Mm.
like hard work, putting myself through school, like taking on debt? Am I going to go be a spiritual practitioner now? And that was all a waste of time and money and like a huge effort. And so it took a while for that path to reveal. Even launching my practice, I didn't know if anyone would want it, if anyone would show up. I had a backup plan of like, going back into community mental health. And so I think there are these pieces where sometimes it's trust the process and just visualize it, and it's like sometimes you don't trust the process at all, but you're still doing it and you're totally freaked out. And I see it go sometimes like in that spiritual world, it can go too far into the like just visualizing, or oh, I have this vision or this intuitive message, but that can take time in the real world to come. So I do think it's
Mhm.
really important to have a grounded approach to our goals as well. And it's, oh, I have this vision of a business. Do you have a business plan? Do you know like how to actually do this? It may not be this exact same business plan as like someone corporate wise, and but you need to have the basic nuts and bolts and know what you're doing and have some kind of this grounded in reality somewhere. Because if people just quit their job without a plan, without a financial safety net, you can put yourself in a really stressful position, and this doesn't take
Yeah.
off. Yeah.
Yeah. We always say if you quit your job, you should probably have another job in place first.
Yeah, or savings or something, like
Yeah.
some kind of plan to be like, what's the bridge point and what's you're realistically expecting in terms of when this business is going to start being profitable.
Yeah. Cause I suppose that's another toxic thing too, right? Okay, I'm going to quit my job and the next thing is just going to appear.
Mhm.
Yeah,
If you have the money to do that and you've made that decision, great. But if you
that's great.
don't,
I would say
then
probably most people don't.
this may not be a good.
Yeah.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
again, some of these things, it's like sometimes there's these hard things we can't control that we're not like manifesting planning. It's like it just happens.
Yeah.
And whether if people have that connection to this as a soul, this is part of my soul purpose here, that can be helpful to a certain degree. It doesn't bypass that there's grief, there's hard human emotions that go through this. We're not here to only be happy and to only be at peace over time. I really do. I felt it personally. I see it with client work too, is we can be more able to witness the emotions and ride them and have a different relationship with them.
Yeah.
But I'm not at a place where it's like this enlightenment bliss all the time, and I'm very spiritually connected. I don't know anybody who authentically is.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's not possible, but I don't think it happens because you refuse to feel anything hard or think about anything hard. I think it happens as a result of the process of actually doing your work. And it would be
Yeah.
a byproduct of it, not a destination. Yeah.
And life still is happening around you. So
Yeah.
even you're still going to experience grief and you're still going to
Mm-hmm.
experience a bunch of different feelings and things that are thrown at you. And sure,
Mm-hmm.
it may get easier to deal with,
Yeah.
but life still happens. So yeah, I don't know that
Yeah.
that's a thing. I don't know that I believe in that somebody eventually reaches that
Yeah. Yeah.
blissful, peaceful, everything's harmonious and wonderful
Yeah.
because there's always at some, maybe for a time
Yeah,
period, sure.
I think you
but
can get to a place where you're more at peace and more regulated and you like relate to things that are happening. Because I know if I look at like before I did all the work, like early 20s, it's like stuff would really throw me off and I'd be super anxious. I'd be losing sleep. I'd be spiraling over it. And now I can deal with stuff where it's, oh, okay, I've got this.
Yeah.
There's emotions to process, there's stuff to go through, but overall it's a much calmer baseline.
Yeah.
So I think people can get to calmer and calmer baselines and things, but you still have the human experience.
And things can creep up that trigger past things too.
Sure.
And sometimes it's going to be easier than others, but it's still there.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, my dear. What does it look like if somebody wants to work with you? Do you do it just mostly one-on-one stuff? Do you do group?
Yeah, like right now, for psychology practice, I am limited to the geographical area, so I can't work with people outside of that. And then, but I have the book if people want to check that out.
Yeah.
Like, I wanted this information to be available to more people beyond one-on-one work. And I've been also in the processes of developing more like workshop course bases because I want to be able to offer more things that is helpful for more people. Like I'm working on a holiday, surviving the stress of the holidays right now because it's such a time of year for mental health.
Yeah.
Family and things. Yeah, and those are more like pay where you position yourself type pricing because I just that cycle breaker piece, the impact of people doing their work just ripples out in such powerful ways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
But
love
not
that.
everyone can access like one-on-one therapy too. So,
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I just recently found out my health insurance is going to finally cover it for me.
Oh, yay. Congratulations.
Like,
Yeah.
yay, 2025. I can get some help with that.
Good. Yeah.
It'll be a nice perk because it is. I think a lot of the going rate for therapists, or at least what I see here in the US now, is it's $120 to $150 an hour. And that's a lot of money. And that's a very privileged thing for people to be able to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and there's people with not very much money that are struggling too.
For sure.
But, and so you're in Canada, so your health system and covering some of that stuff is probably better than ours, but
it's different. It's definitely different.
Okay.
I think we still have definitely gaps and there's definitely people who need more support who aren't getting the support they need.
yeah.
But are like many people have insurance through their workplace and stuff and we're not bound by the same rules that it sounds a US therapist. Like a US sounds like it's a lot of like private insurance companies, like multi-corporations. Like many people don't stay with them because it's not sustainable themselves and they often need like a diagnostic code, all these other things. Like many employer benefits here are, here's your money for the year. Like just send in the receipts. You don't need a diagnosis. Like it nice. Seems different in some ways. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's not the greatest here, but we hopefully will be working on it. I don't know.
So things are changing here too, and who knows if it's going to be better or not.
Yeah, it's crazy. All right. I will link all the ways to get a hold of you in the show notes, your website, your book, if anybody wants to read your book, because I think it sounds wonderful. Do you have any final parting words for my listeners?
No, that's all. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks for coming on here and sharing all of that. I think it was very, very eye-opening, and hopefully somebody listening learned something about themselves. All right, everyone, thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next one.